Hey guys, Martin from Sound7 here. So I wanted to talk with you this evening about a really unique delay plugin called Delay 4 by HY Plugins. It's in some ways it's a kind of standard looking delay plugin with the usual features, but in typical HY fashion, there's a lot of additional functionality and utility built into the plugin, both in terms of under the hood, but also in terms of some of the features that it offers, and also some of the modulation and additional kind of outboard it offers. So I think what we're going to do is just have a look at the plugin itself, kind of top to bottom on the key features, and then we'll run through using it kind of in situ with a few different audio tracks and seeing what we can come up with, just having a look and getting a feel for the sound itself and seeing some of those features in action on the material itself, as it were. So I've got a list of 3 audio tracks here, 3 different elements: a synth line, guitar line, and a vocal line. So just to run through. And all together. So fairly pleasant sounding kind of combination of stems there, but very little in the way of audio effects going on. Perhaps just a bit of reverb on the vocal room and perhaps on the guitar very slightly. This is the main feature panel of the Delay 4 plugin. So from top to bottom, we've kind of got the standard delay features here. And just to run through left to right, it kind of models a few different delays. Most of them fairly normal for a delay plugin, but also kind of one wildcard, if you like, in terms of the delay modeling. We'll talk about that one in a second. So just running left to right, we've got simple, dual, grain delay, groove delay, and what the developer calls PM delay, which is actually modeled on a hardware lexicon unit called the Primetime Digital Delay, Primetime 93. 93, not a year designation, it was actually developed in 1978 as a kind of mono digital delay. Really quite sought after, and just doing a bit of history on Reverb and kind of other audio sites. When they do come up, which seems to be fairly rare, when they do come up, regularly going for £2,000, £3,000, and a bit more on dollars as well, obviously. So, quite a prestigious hardware unit. Interesting that the Delay 4 opts to model that, and to my mind, it's no other delay plugin I've come across, at least, specifically sets out to model that lexicon unit itself. There may well be some out there, but as I say, none to my mind. So the fact that it kind of builds itself with modeling that is, I think in itself really quite unique. So those are main delay features there, the main delay modeling. Each one has its own kind of parameters that are fundamental to that type of delay modeling, and a bypass section as well. You get all the usual controls that you expect on any kind of delay: high pass, low pass, feedbacks, time, etc. Moving on to the right, we've got the amp kind of section, panning, volume, which will be treated as a wet and dry control in the traditional sense. Wave shaper, which again I think is quite unique for a delay plugin. An EQ kind of EQs the delay tails, so don't get confused if you're going to run some audio or whatever through the delay plugin. You bang the EQ across it and you're like, hold on, I can't really hear anything on the source material. No, because it's just actually EQing the subsequent delays from that original source material. The fact that it's there on the delay, I think is really quite welcome, because particularly with delays, especially if you get kind of high feedback or quite wet, saturated in terms of delay control on an audio source, it can kind of overwhelm the audio material quite heavily. Sometimes that's advantageous. You want it for a creative effect. Sometimes if it's in the mix, that becomes a problem in terms of dialing that in with the rest of the mix and the balance overall. You can get so far with the high pass and low pass controls to kind of filter some of that out. But again, you only get so far. You could link that up in terms of some parallel EQ via your mixer on your DAW, and you could then use the EQ section from that. But that's a bit more time consuming. Sometimes comes with some additional latency or kind of phase considerations you need to be conscious of. So the fact there's a built-in EQ, 3-band as well, right off the bat on the plugin, really welcome particularly from a mix engineer's point of view, but almost definitely from a creative perspective as well. Moving on here, we've got the modulation. Loads of modulation options. So what we've got is standard LFO, envelope follower, what's called the StepLFO, MPE, and sample and hold. So most of those fairly straightforward, but perhaps the most unique one is the StepLFO. And what that does, and I'm probably actually just going to mute here just so we can actually see it running without the audio at the moment. So what it does is, well, actually, let me roll back a second. So with HY plugins, they all adopt this kind of modulation approach where you got your modulation sources, and anywhere you've got these little plus symbols is, essentially a destination you can mod straight into from any of the sources here where you see these kind of crosshair arrows. And that includes your macros here, and includes the kind of standard modulation options here. So by way of example, I'm on LFO and I can patch this LFO straight into low pass filter. And the HY plugins have some really great visual feedback, so I can bring the modulation amount down on that. So what I'm effectively doing now is sweeping the LFO into the low pass filter and sweeping it back on itself because I've gone down left there. I could go right to go the opposite way, but because we're at the extreme of that control already, you wouldn't be able to then see that until I kind of middle point that dial there. So you can see that actually that would sweep upwards into the extremes of the low pass filter every time that LFO sweeps. So that's fundamentally how the modulation works with most, if not all, HY plugins. Really simple, really intuitive. So looking back at where we are on the modulators themselves, as I say, so LFO, envelope follower, and the StepLFO is really the unique one here in my experience, because the audio would be running at the moment. We've got essentially different steps of which we can modulate, kind of like a standard step sequencer, but we can drop different patterns into them. So all of these here are predefined patterns we can drop in. We can say, okay, I kind of want a square wave sort of step on that one, sawtooth on that one, maybe just flat line on that one. And what that's going to do is increase the amount of modulation control and pump that into whichever destination you're using that on, essentially. So if we used our low pass example there, essentially it's using the parameters from here, the amount from each step independently, and then pushing that modulation amount as defined by these steps into the parameters you're modulating. And you're not restricted to just modulating one source into one destination. You can modulate as many parameters as you want on HY plugins, which is really cool and offers so much creative possibility. Literally infinite variations of style, sound, character, tone, etc. So yeah, that's really quite special. So I think what we'll try and do is just actually try and do something in action with this. So if I do it on the time, because that's going to be the most pronounced and it's going to be very audible as to how we hear that in action then. So you quickly get a feel for actually how that's working. Now, granted, it sounds pretty awful, but it definitely gives you a really good kind of audio representation of how that step sequencer is pumping those modulated amounts by the amounts we specify just by clicking on and dragging up into that parameter there. You can see, as I did there, you can change the step sequence of speed. So many different options available, swing, so on and so forth. So that, to my mind, is such a unique modulation source that I haven't seen on any other delay. I've certainly seen it in other plugins for different aspects, particularly on synth plugins, some filter plugins, not the delay plugin personally. So nice. And just one more thing to mention on the LFOs, and the modulation sources. You don't just have this set here, and essentially how this works is whichever one I've got engaged as visible is the one that's going to be modulating, the one that's going to be active. So much like when you've got the delay panel here, whichever delay you're choosing is the one that's going to be active and giving you the results. Same with the modulation. So if I go on StepLFO, it means these other adjacent modulation sources are not going to be active. So LFO is not going to be active. It's going to be the StepLFO. It's going to be active. And if you're thinking, okay, well, one LFO, but lots of kind of one modulation, but lots of different LFO options, etc. That's kind of healthy, but looking for a bit more, well, no worries, because what we've actually got is 4 of the same here. Each LFO modulation section denoted by its number and its color. So we've essentially got 4 clones of that original one we were playing with to play with. So if you think, you can get wacky by dropping LFO1, modulation 1 into 5 different parameters. You can drop modulation 2 into 5 more different parameters, have it running at different rates, or having a step LFO on one, having a standard LFO on the other, having a sample and hold on another, and so on and so forth. And just looking around the screen and seeing the amount of different destinations we've got to play with there, so much is on offer here in terms of being able to modulate and get really creative. So for sound designers, particularly kind of generative audio creation, where you've got kind of stuff sweeping in and stuff being created generatively over a longer period, an absolutely ideal scenario for that type of environment. Moving on, macros, again, can be linked into your MIDI controller, wheels, parameters, etc., to do a similar sort of thing in terms of source and mod destinations. And, interestingly, what we've got here in the kind of final stages is an Outboard FX section times2 in themselves, and then a ducker as well. So, fairly, again, I keep using the word unique, but HY plugins are very unique in a lot of ways. So, in my opinion, really unique to have Outboard FX on top of what is essentially an effect plugin. And the madness is that you can have a ping pong delay on a delay, and then you could add another simple delay on top of a delay on top of a delay, or swap that to, modulations, reverbs, dynamics, all of this. The only other delay plugin I've seen that level of Outboard FX on, I think, is one of the ones from UVI, the Relay or Replayer, I can't remember, I think it's the Relayer effects plugin, delay plugin. Certainly haven't seen it on any others. So yeah, again, loads of potential there. So not just a delay plugin in itself, but a delay and multi-effects plugin is essentially what we've got here. Ducker for the final output. And, just to be clear, I can't drag and drop these panels around, they don't shift, but I can shift the signal flow itself by these panels here. So we've got delay and this kind of generally how we're routing through that signal there, but we can actually change those around at will to give us some variation, flexibility in the signal flows, some interesting results from that as well. So those are the features of the plugin itself, from top to bottom, and there's so much more beyond that. And I could spend 3 hours on this video, but I just wanted to kind of do not a deep dive, but a nice showcase, just, some of the features, the main features, key features. And I think what we'll do now is just run through some of these features in action, have a look at some of the couple of presets as well, just so we know what we can get really quickly, results-wise. We might try programming our own kind of delay on one of the final audio tracks, just to see what we can achieve without the help of presets. So going back to our synth line, let's clear that modulation and save ourselves the sanity. So I've had a look and had a play with this plugin already previously for other content that I'm doing. So I'm fairly well versed with it now. So I know what I'm up against here in the presets, and there's one specifically I want to use, which is the dual state variable filter. And what we got there is a really nice filter on the Outboard FX ×2, being modulated by all sorts of different parameters here. The corresponding colours you can see for the modulation amounts on each. So again, really nice visual aid of what you've got going modulation wise, and certainly quite inviting in terms of experimentation as well, and wanted to try new things out from that. So that just gives you a quick flavour of going beyond a delay line, and opens up in terms of what else can be achieved. Definitely like a sort of French funky house type of filter. Really nice resonant qualities, really nice on the sweep, really good audio quality on that. That's definitely what I'm going for on this synth lead, so I'm going to kind of leave that one where it is. Next, on the guitar line, I think we're probably going to custom job this one. Probably, should we? Yeah, let's try the Lexicon one. So what I've done there is obviously just unbypassed it. So we've got kind of time A, time B corresponding with the signal controls here, volume A, volume B. So at the moment is we're dealing with just time A, so I'm going to crank up volume B as well. I'm going to bring that right back to perhaps try with a bit of a chorus effect initially. Kind of real nice thickening sound. So we've got a kind of bit of a chorus effect almost going on there. And I think what I'm actually going to do is to help that kind of sweep and move, I'm going to drop in some modulators and just to play around with that time parameter slightly. And I think we'll go to different ones here to give us some flexibility over the timings of that modulation. So LFO 1. I don't want it to sweep too much, just a bit, just to keep it, under the 10 kind of milliseconds there. And likewise for number 2 as well. I think we'll maybe bring that one back towards ourselves slightly. And you can see just a touch on the parameters there, so it's probably just moving it by a couple milliseconds, respectively. And you can hear quite gently, but just audibly, that kind of sweep. If I switch them off, it just becomes static, and you get the thickening effect of it being present initially. That almost stereo doubling effect, but then switching the modulators on, you just get that sweep. And I'm just going to bring the rate back on both just slightly, but to keep them slightly varied from each other, just so you get the interplay there of the two different times between themselves. So let's bypass that in total. Off. And it just gives us a bit of something on that guitar there, which was otherwise pretty dry. But what if we still wanted to delay on top of that and maybe a bit of reverb? Well, heading back to the outboard section, of course, we can do that knowing what we know now in terms of the outboard FX. So I'm going to ping pong delay that on top of our kind of custom chorus there. Now, if we wanted to get more specific with the chorus, we could start modulating some parameters on the feedback as well for some kind of extra taste. Just to kind of give us more of a wah-wah effect. rate back on that one. Perhaps push it to extreme so we can hear it in action. Again, it just gives us a bit more flavour. So back onto the Outboard FX, where we actually want a traditional delay now on top of that. Dial the feedback back a bit. I'm going to lower the tone, I think, to the low pass to give us a bit more of a vintage vibe. Now we can sync to host tempo, but I quite like having it run free. And that's quite nice. I think that's quite a quite nice feel on that. Do we bypass that? Off. There we are. Certainly adds a bit more character to that guitar line. Now, I don't know, for any of you guys who watched the plugin video I did on HY Poly, I mentioned about mixing things in isolation, and I'll say it again here for those of you who haven't seen that. You know, ideally from an engineering perspective, from a technical perspective, when you're mixing, you really want to be mixing and creating sounds in conjunction with your other sounds, not so much in isolation, particularly when you're, you know, garnishing with FX or creating something in terms of sound from scratch. Because those elements being played in amongst the other tracks, essentially where you're finally going to hear that sound. So creating sounds or garnishing sounds, adding effects in isolation on an isolated track is sometimes not ideal, because you end up adding too much effects, reverb, delay, feedbacks, modulation, etc. on that one sound in isolation, because you're getting the full spectrum of the sound. Then when dropping it back into the mix, you run into some problems that you'll have to go back to your sound and redial that back in, or trying to fix it down the line at the mix stage, which is never ideal. So, you know, don't take my lead and do everything in isolation as I'm doing here. I'm just keeping it in isolation really for initially, just for the purpose of the video, for you guys to take as much away from the technique as you can. But also, we've only got 3 elements here, so there is a bit more of the frequency spectrum we can play into without kind of getting too much into frequency clashing and masking, etc. So we've done the delay on the guitar line, we've done delay on the synth line. Let's just hit it up on the vocal now. And I think there's this cool technique on the grain delay, and I don't think I'm going to use it in situ, but just to give you a kind of feel. Kind of that semitone tune function where you can drop it down octaves, or just a few semitone. Really cool. But actually what I think I'm going to do is just do a kind of standard delay, bring the feedback up. I actually want to high pass this one a bit of low pass. Dotted. Don't know why, but I just love 1/8 dotted. Always my go-to on delay lines. Not together, but in conjunction with something else. Always 1/8 dotted. We can swap the balance between delay line 1 and 2 here. So if we've got a preference for one of the delay lines, we can mess with the feedback, bring the wet back a bit. And I think I'm going to EQ out some of the bottom end here. Probably one right there, and perhaps boost some mid and some high. Dial that right back now, because that's giving us a bit more oomph in the delay lines themselves. And I think I'm probably going to extend the reverb as well. decay that out a bit. So just a bypass. Back in. Okay, pretty good. And all together. Bypass it all. So we've gone from that very static, very dry 3-track to something as, you know, almost quite disco-y. We could take it in a disco direction. So many different things we could do with that. So, you know, I think there's still some opportunity there to play with the levels a bit, you know, and bring that so it's all kind of a bit more coherent in the mix between each other. But, you know, for the purpose of what we're trying to achieve, and just have a look at that delay functionality here, you know, I think that gives us a really nice flavour and taste of, you know, the utility and creativity available to us with this delay plugin. In terms of pricing, you know, this delay is priced really reasonably, in my opinion. Certainly offers a lot more for a lot less than others in terms of pricing. So yeah, you know, there's a demo available. There's also a free version. You know, no better way to try get a flavour for it. The free version essentially comes with just this delay line, you know, without all the additional utility you get from it, from these sections. But even just a delay plugin on its own, you know, the fact that it's free is definitely one to add to your plugin library because it's really nice sounding. The full version is available on the website, so if you want to get onto the website and check that out, it's available there. If you're looking for the trial version, then it's on the main product page for the full version. Just scroll down at the bottom where you'll see the download links for the trial. And the free version is available in the store. Just go down, search by category, and just click on free plugins and you should be able to see it there coming up. So really appreciate your time this evening, guys. If you could hit the subscribe button just so I can keep on doing content videos. And yeah, we'll see you for the next one. All right, look forward to it. Take care. Bye-bye.